Hello friends, welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. In today's show, we are going to be doing a Svelte Appstravaganza. So we're essentially going to build several different apps with Svelte. We're going to start fairly simple. So we're going to build a player score counter. It'll just have a up score, down score button for two different players. And then we're going to build a to-do app. This will pretty much demonstrate all of the major concepts in Svelte and how you implement them. And then after that, we're going to build a Reddit client. So we're going to talk to the Reddit API and get some Reddit posts linked, and we'll have multiple pages. So for the Reddit client, we'll actually use this thing called SvelteKit, which I'll talk about more when we get there. But SvelteKit is more of a full-featured framework that uses Svelte. And then after that, we'll build movie search. I'll say movie search is tentative because this could take us a really long time. But if all goes well, then we're going to get to all four of these apps today. But yeah, question is, first question, what is Svelte? So Svelte is a front-end framework. It allows you to build front-end websites. And Svelte, the library itself, after bundling and compiling your code, is just JavaScript and just runs inside of the web browser. So you can compare Svelte to things like Vue.js or React or Angular. It's comparable to all of these in that you can build front-end websites with it. But where it may one of the major differences is that it has no virtual DOM. Let's take a quick stretch. Stream done. So if you know anything about Vue or React, they use this thing called the virtual DOM, which basically is a mechanism for deciding what to update on the page when things change in your app. But Svelte does not use a virtual DOM. Whenever you compile your Svelte code, it gets turned into just vanilla JavaScript. There is no runtime and there is no virtual DOM. It gets turned into document.querySelector or element.textContent type code. It gets turned into just DOM code. And there's really no runtime either. So your builds are really small and the apps are really fast because it's the smallest amount of code needed to get the job done. So that's what Svelte is. And we're going to jump right in. So I'm going to use Pico CSS. That's another thing for just to give us some basic styling. I'm going to try this out. So I've never tried this out before, but essentially it gives you default styles without any classes. Yeah, thank you for the link, Josh. So like this, so you write this code, and that's you get this by default. No need to add classes or anything like that. So this is going to be really good for like rapid prototyping. So that's what we're going to use today. But all right, let's write some code. First up, we need to generate an app. So we can run this command in our terminal. And the first app we're going to generate is the player score counter. So I can name it here. dgit is a tool for just cloning a repo locally and putting it into a specific folder. So we'll just do this because this app is going to be based on this template, and this template it's fairly simple. So as you'll see here is like we don't really have a CLI tool like we do in the Vue world or in the Angular world. This just gives us a basic template project, and then we go from there. But at this point, we now have this player score counter folder, and we can open it up. And you'll see that there is a rollup config. Now, for the apps we're building, we won't have to modify this, but this is similar to like Webpack. It's a way of bundling up our app, but they use rollup instead of Webpack. But if we take a look in here, we've got a source directory with a main entry point. This is how it works. We pull in our app component. We create an instance of that app component and tell it where to render. In this case, it's just going to render on the body. And then if this component has any props, we can pass them in. For our use case, we're not going to have any props, but we'll see. And then this is our app component. So here you will see the beauty of Svelte. It's similar to Vue.js in that you have multiple elements. So you have like your script element, your HTML element, and then your style element all within the component. But what's nice is this script element just defines variables. So right here, this is actually pulling in a variable as from a prop right here. Like, so this name is going to be world. But you can also just define variables, and then those variables are instantly reactive, meaning you can use them in your UI, and then if you were to modify them in like an event listener or a function, the UI is going to automatically update, and you don't have to do anything special for that. But we'll get into that. For now, we should just do an npm install. And so that's going to download all our dependencies. Let's look at our package.json to look at our dependencies. So yeah, we've got all the roll-up stuff and then Svelte version 3. Cool, and then we should be able to start it up. So it's running on port 8080. Here it is. Here is our Svelte app. If we look at the source code for it, we have a bundle.js, and this is all of the code needed. So this has our app component in it. And then all this other stuff at the top is just code required to get it actually working. But at the end of the day, that's all the JavaScript that we're shipping to the page. Cool. Yeah, done. We have a hello world. But let's get going with our first app. So we're actually going to build a player score counter. So we've generated the app. Let's add Pico CSS really quick. I think they just have a CDN that we can pull it in from. Download Pico. Unpackage. Yeah, this is what we want. So this is just going to give us some basic styles. Pico is really nice in that I add it to the page and then everything will just look that way by default. I don't have to add any CSS classes. And I think they have a dark mode. But regardless, let's add this. So if we look in the folder, there is a public folder and then there's an index.html. So this is the file that all of our code gets injected into. And this is where all the elements and stuff will be living. So for now, I'm just going to add that as a link there. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it did work. You can see we have a dark background now. So we've added Pico. Wonderful. So let's actually get a button on the page. And so let's just open up our app component here. And first thing is this app component doesn't need any props. So I'm just going to remove that piece there. So our app component is very simple. It's just rendering on the body. And then we don't need this anymore. But we do need to set up some variables for our player. So I'll need something like the player 1 score. That starts off as 0. And then we need a way to modify that. So we're going to add a button that just says up. And then when this thing is clicked, we increase the score. So I've used Svelte before, but I forgot what the syntax is. So check this out. So one of the great things about Svelte is their docs. They have this interactive little editor here that shows you the output on the right-hand side, but they basically have an example for like every single common thing you would do in front-end development. And so one of the things I'm trying to do right now are DOM events. How can I, for example, listen for a click event? And that works like this. So you do on : and then the name of the event. So on click, and then I can specify a function. So we'll say increase player 1 score. And then over here, I can have a function, increase player 1 score. And then we just increase it. So we'll say plus equals 1. That's it. That's our up button. And then if we want to show the score, I believe we can do it like this. Let's see what we get. All right, so 0. Look at that. We're done. We're not done. There's some other stuff we're gonna do. But this is the code, and this is why I like Svelte. So let's note some things, right? We are just directly modifying this variable. We didn't have to do a set state. We didn't have to do anything like that. Yeah, we absolutely could inline this as well. So I could do just a little inline arrow function that just says player 1 score plus equals 1. This absolutely will work, and then I don't need that separate function. So it's 0. Beautiful. So yeah, I mean, this just needs a reference to a function. However you want to define that, you can. I do like to have it as a function within my script tag here, though. Yeah, and then the other thing to note is this right here. So if I want to actually reference a variable from my script in my HTML, I just use single curly braces like this. And then let's also create a down button. So we'll have another function that is decrease player 1 score. And we'll have another function, but instead it does a subtraction. And so now we should have an up and a down. So go up, go down. There, but we potentially want to block against negatives. So we'll just say if player 1 score is less than 0, then player 1 score is 0. So that way this will never, no matter how many times I click this, this will never go below 0. Great. How to import other custom components. I'll show that now. So basically what we want to do is we want to have 2 different scores on the screen. We want a player 1 score. So this will say like player 1. And then below that, we want player 2 score as well. Now, of course, I could just like copy this, paste this, create some more variables. Like I could do this, but I mean, right now they're tied to the same variable. I'd have to create new variables, but this is the use case for a component, right? So we basically want to componentize this whole thing here. And then we'll just have 2 instances of that component, one for player 1, one for player 2. So let's make our own little component here. We'll call this player score.svelte. So we just have our template like that. We'll put it in a div. And then we just need to pull this entire script section, actually. And that goes here. I'm going to rename all of these to just player score, though. Cool. In this case, we do want a prop, though, because I want to be able to pass in like the player label like this. So, or like player name. So that way we can have a player 1 and a player 2. Here, I believe it's just export let player name like this. And so this is a way of pulling in a prop. Yeah, Josh has confirmed. So I define it like this with this export keyword, and what that means is on the other side, when I'm using that component, I can actually pass the prop down. So at this point, let's just use it. So at this point, our app component gets really simple. We need an instance of the player score, where the player name is player 1, like this. First of all, how do we get player score? We just import it. Like that. And we've done something wrong. Could not resolve player score from app Svelte. Do I have to do .svelte? Okay, we got there. Great. Now let's just review what I did there. So we basically took all of that code that was in app.svelte. We moved it into its own file called playerscore.svelte. And so this defines all of this. I did see in the chat earlier, someone asked, do we need a top level element? I actually don't think we do. We could actually define this without a div and it would be just fine. Yeah, works just fine. which is interesting because if we inspect it, we should see that all of those elements are just getting rendered directly inside of main instead of having a parent element, which is pretty nice. Like in React, you would have to use a fragment. Yeah, but I still want it to be in a div because I'll show you. We could like put them side by side in a grid or something like that. So I want it to be in a div. The other thing is we defined that we have a prop. So a prop is a way of passing data down. So what we've said on this line of code is I want the outside world to be able to pass in a player name, and then we're going to put that player name right here. And so now over back in my app, I import that component in, and then I can reference it. But now that I've componentized it, we can add another instance and just say player 2. And so now we have 2 independent instances of that component. This one has a score, this one has a score, and then they don't interfere with each other. So that's great. Is this JSX or HTML here? It's Svelte's own custom thing. So there is actually a Svelte compiler that turns this into DOM code, vanilla JavaScript code. So this isn't anything specific. This is Svelte. But yeah, I like the syntax. I really do. So, I mean, this is easy. This is easy. Defining our props are easy. Defining variables is easy. It's just easy. It's like an easier version of Vue. I'm also going to get rid of all these styles. I don't think we even need it. Yeah, I mean that kind of did like some text centering, but now I could define those text centering styles in the player component itself. We'll get there. Can I do colon click instead of on click? Let's try it. So that would be like a Vue-like thing. Doesn't seem to work. So it does want the on. But because they have their own compiler, that's something they probably easily could add. Maybe, I don't know. I say that, but you'd have to parse this. I don't know how easy it would be to parse that. Okay, so we have some styles here. I'm just going to create a center class that does text-align center. And then we can use this center class on both of these. That's the other cool thing is, I mean, if you're comparing it to React, we don't have to use anything like class name or anything like that. It just works, which is nice. Cool. Oh yeah, and that's another good point, Andreas, who is asking, hello, Andreas, who's asking, is that scope styled to the component? It is. Yeah. Let's see what gets generated. So if we look at like this H2, you'll see it has this center class, but then it has this generated class name, and that makes it so that these classes don't leak out of the component. So for instance, if we go to so this is a center class with text-align center, and if we go up to the app and we add an H1 here that just says player score counter, and if we were to put class center on this, it won't apply to it. You see, this is not centered. Because Svelte generated that extra little class name there to make sure that it's scoped only to the component and doesn't leak out of the component. So yeah, by default, CSS classes are scoped to the component that they were defined in. Reset button? Yeah, let's do it. The main issue though is we would need 2 reset buttons, one for player 1, one for player 2. If we wanted a global reset button, like do I have too many T's? I do. Reset. And actually, let's look at Pico CSS. Is there a way to do a red button? I'll do it like this. Contrast outline. Oh, I think because I added the classless Pico CSS, it doesn't have that. Let's not do that. Let's just this. Cool. And then I want to click this button to reset the scores. So let's do it. I think in this case, this would be like where a situation where I would want to almost like have an event bus, so I could, when I click this, it fires off an event, and then these two could be listening for that event. Because otherwise, it's going to be a little bit tricky to tell these two components that they need to reset their inner score. Unless I lifted the state up, it's doable. We would basically have to pass a function down to a prop that is a function that sets that function as a variable so that it can be used later on. But I don't know if I want to do that. Explain DOM like I'm. So DOM is document object model. And essentially, the code we're writing interacts with the document object model to add elements to the page and then also modify elements that are on the page. So each one of these things is an element. So this is an H2, this is an H3, this is a button. And when the score changes, this H3 needs to be modified. This DOM element, this H3 DOM element needs to be modified. Its text content needs to be changed when this button is pressed. And so behind the scenes, Svelte has generated code that does that. So on button press, modify the DOM, the document object model, modify that element to have that latest value. If you ever open up the dev tools, this thing you see in the inspector is a visual representation of the DOM. It looks like HTML, but you'll notice that as I hover over each element, it's highlighting them on the page. And it's able to do that because this is the DOM. This is a visual representation of the DOM. You'd use bind this to the player component to reference to it and export a function to reset from the component. So could I do something like this? I have two variables, player 1 component, player 2 component, and then I say bind this to player 1 component. Player 2 component, and then when the reset button is clicked, in here, do I have actual access to these components to modify their internal variables? Yeah. All right, I'm gonna skip all your chats because I don't have time. So let's see. If I click reset, yeah, look at that. Yeah, but so Pablo is saying we need to export a function from our player. So if we export a reset that just sets the player score to 0, can we just call reset? That's really easy. Huh. Look at that. Yeah, so I mean, if in the React or even in the Vue world, typically what we would do is lift the state up. So all of the state would go to the top, so that way we can reset it to 0, because here in the app we would have access to it. But in this case, we're just reaching into that component and calling its function, which is fine. I would say in the real world, you probably don't want to do this, only because this can get really messy, right? If your components are exporting a bunch of functions and then you're calling all of those functions from the parent, it could get messy. So I'll just say this could get messy. Probably need to lift state up. Okay, I'm done with the player app. It's a super simple app. I think the main concepts we demonstrated here were just this idea of defining variables, modifying those variables within functions, and then mapping functions to DOM event listeners. And then the other thing is actually rendering variables within our HTML using this syntax here. Well, .reset is a function we define. So reset the score, please. We define this. This isn't any Svelte magic. We're calling that function that we defined inside. I bet you can hear the squeaking sound of my desk now. I just don't know how to find it. I have a feeling it's on this side. I'm just going to spray WD-40 all over it until it stops. I think I found it. Oh, Fonta has a good point. I think actually I do want to try this before we move on. If I do bind child variable name, parent variable name, you can access the variable in both the parent and the child. So in the case of player score, like if I did yeah, I don't know if I would want to do this though, but I think this would work, right? So you'd say player score equals player 1 score. And then like that. It didn't break. And then now instead of calling reset, we just set this variable. Yeah. I think I prefer this. I don't like reaching in to call a function. Let's do this. Yeah. And then we don't need this reset function anymore because we're just doing it from the parent, because the parent has access to the variables. Okay, I'm really done this time. No longer need the component variables now. You are right. Yes. That simplifies it. Right? Yeah. I like this. I like this better. This makes more sense at a glance, right? Because we basically define the values here, and then because we've bound them, those values are modifiable within the child component. So like even in Vue, you typically wouldn't do this, where the child is actually modifying the prop that got passed down. But in this case, we can, because we're specifically binding it to be modifiable in the child. All right. We're going to focus for a little bit now. We're going to build a to-do app. So let's go ahead and generate another app. In this case, we're going to call it to-do. Yeah, I'm pretty sure someone else redeemed a focus mode earlier, so that's why I did 16 minutes. Also, I'm getting way too distracted by chat. I'm already an hour and 48 minutes in, and we've only did the first one, so that's why. All right, so we've generated the app. I'm going to install dependencies. And then we'll open up VS Code in this specific directory. We need to make a couple of changes. So I'm going to change the port that it starts up on. And then we're going to go ahead and add a Pico CSS. So I just need to copy that from the other app that I generated. This here. So this just gives us those default styles. This. Cool. And then at this point, we just have our our main entry point that loads in the app component. Great. And then we have our app component. We'll just get rid of all the default styles. And we'll do this. All right. Start it up. There we go. So we have the basic hello world. And now let's build a to-do app. So if we look at our to-do list, we've generated the app, we added the CSS. Now let's create a form for adding the to-do. From the get-go, I'm just gonna go ahead and start creating components. So usually I like build everything at the top level and then like extract it into components, but we're beyond that. We're just gonna dive right in. So let's call this the to-do form. It'll have a script. It's going to be an actual form. We will have a label that says new to do, and then this will have an input like this, and then we'll give it a placeholder. Enter a to do ... Great. And then so this is our to do form. We're going to import it in here. And then we'll place an instance of it right here. Okay, see what we get. It's beautiful. So I want to be able to say, learn Svelte. Click enter, make sure the page doesn't refresh, and then add it to some sort of list. Cool, so we've got the form to add it. Now, when the form is submitted, we need to add it to a list of to-do items. So let's get that going. If you remember earlier, we could do on, and then we could specify the DOM event that we care about. So I'll do that. And let's take a quick stretch. Quick stretch. So that's great. Here I'll say something like form submitted. Actually, yeah, it should be fine. Okay. So we'll have a function, form submitted. We'll log here, form was submitted. And that's what I was going to look for. So we can prevent the default action. So technically, we get access to the event here. So just like in regular DOM code or even in React, and when I say regular DOM code, I mean like vanilla JavaScript, we could do this, prevent default. We could, but we don't have to. If right here we just do prevent, is it prevent or prevent default? We'll try both. We'll try both. If we do this, it should prevent the default action by default. So, wow. No, that didn't work. So default. Wow. Yeah, look at that. And then it was logged to the console just like this. So that's great. The function is getting called when the form is submitted. We also could just add a button here. Add to do, and then that should be a submit button by default. So yeah, when we click it, the form gets submitted. Wonderful. Now at this point, we want to pass the data up. So we need a prop. Export let add to do. So and actually, but before we even do that, let's get the state of this input as a variable in this script here. So I could say new to do starts off as the empty string like this, and then we want to bind it to the input. So I can just do bind. Is it this? Bind value. I think that's what it is. And if I've done that right, we can demonstrate this here. So whatever I type in the input box should be displayed below it. Yeah, so I've done that right. But what that means is now, as I type in this input box, behind the scenes, it's keeping track of it in that state variable. And then when the form is submitted, I can do something with this. And in this case, I want to call a function like add to do, pass in the value of the input box, and then reset the input box back to the empty string, right? Okay, but what is add to do? We need to pass it down from the parent, because the parent component is going to keep track of the entire array of to-dos. So we'll say export let add to do, and then over here we'll have a function add to do that takes in the to do, and then it will need a variable for all of the to-dos. So that starts off as an array, and then when we add the to-do, we're just going to push it in. So we'll say the title is the to-do, and it is not done because we just created it. And then now we need to pass this function down to the form. So we'll say add to do equals add to do, and now that we're passing the function down, when this form is submitted, it's going to call that function, which passes the data back up and then puts it into this array. And for now, we'll just log out the to-dos array to make sure that it happens. So our first to-do is learn Svelte, add it. There we go. So we have an array with an object in it. Awesome. And if we try to add something else like learn SvelteKit, kit. Now we have two things in the array. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, and I think so that's one thing I'm going to run into is, and we'll test this out, but what I'm seeing in the chat is what I actually need to do is I need to push it in and then like reset the variable, because otherwise Svelte isn't listening for things like push. And so you have to overwrite it. I mean, or yeah, we could spread it, but I don't want to do that because there's no point in creating a copy of the array because you don't actually need to do that. Will this do it? I think that might do it. Regardless, we now need to iterate. So I have this array of objects. I want to show them all on the page, and so I need an each block. Now, this is one of the things I don't like about Svelte is their syntax for like each blocks, and even their syntax for conditional rendering, which we haven't shown yet, like if blocks. I don't like it. It could have been better, but it's fine. Let's get into it. So for each to-dos as title and done. So this is basically going to iterate over the to-dos array and then give us an li element for each to-do in that array. In this case, we just want to display the title. See if it works. It works. Wow. It works. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So the one weird thing is the fact that we had to do this right here. Let's comment this out and see what happens if I don't have that line. Wow. Yeah. So it doesn't refresh the page. And so this is weird, right? The fact that you're just reassigning the variable to itself, but basically behind the scenes, whenever a variable is reassigned, Svelte knows that it needs to like recalculate or re-render what is on the page in that location. So by reassigning it to itself, it can know that it changed and then update it on the page. And I prefer this, even though the syntax is weird. It feels hacky and it's weird. I prefer this to doing something like spreading to-dos and then putting a new object inside like this. Like this is how you would do it like in React. But I don't like this because you're using more memory, right? You're creating a copy of the array. I don't see a point in doing that. Yeah. And that's the other thing, like American 2050 is saying, is like really behind the scenes, they could just listen for when push happens on an array, which is what Vue.js does. That's why in Vue.js, you don't have to do something like this. You can just push and then the UI updates. Yeah. How did I declare the add to do prop in the child? You just export it. So I exported a variable. Now, I'm not using TypeScript or anything like that, so I haven't defined like this should be a function, and it really is just, it's just a variable, a placeholder. And then here, I am actually passing down a function. Now, of course, if I left this off, we'd get an error, because then in here, it would attempt to call undefined. There's some other checking that you would want to do in the real world. But yeah, this is great. Let's look back at our list. So we're adding it to the list when the form is submitted. Beautiful. Show to-dos in a list on the page. We're doing that. And we basically did that with the each syntax. So like in React, you would use array.map. In Vue, you would use v4. In Angular, you would do ng4. Here we have this each syntax, which is weird. I always have to look it up. I mean, obviously if I use Svelte every day, I probably would get the hang of it, but you have the pound each and then it ends with /each. That's wrapped in curly braces. This, I believe, is destructuring, and we do get access to the index if we want it. But I believe we also could just do this, and then I could do like to-do.title. Yeah. So that works. Cool. Let's do this. So click a to-do to mark it as done. So whenever I click on a to-do, I want that to-do dot done to flip. So mark it as done or unmark it as done. That should change it behind the scenes. So if it was true, it becomes false. If it was false, it becomes true. But I want to do some custom styling here. So like I want a CSS class called done that does some text decoration, like line through. So when the to-do is done, apply this CSS class to it. How do we do that? I don't know. Let's look back at the docs. Let's see if we have anything for the class directive. Yeah, so you can do class : the name of the class you want to apply. So in this case, I want to apply the done class if to-do.done is true. So that's how I do that. So whenever to-do.done is true, this CSS class is going to get applied to it, and it's going to get a line through it. So learn Svelte, we'll add it, click it. See? Cool. We could also do stuff like this, like the to-do has a specific class with like a cursor pointer. And then we can just put the to-do class on the list item. No, not like that. Not like that. Like that. Like regular HTML. Hello. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing we could do as well. We're going to add that. So American 2050 is like, we need a check mark and a not and an X. Let's do some conditional rendering. So if the to-do is done, show a checkbox next to it as well. And for that, we can use an if block like this. So within the to-do, right at the beginning, if to-do.done is true, then we'll just show, not spam, a span, with the check emoji, like that. And so if it's done, it now gets that checkbox. Spam. What's up, Alka? Thanks for being here. Yeah, and Finn is asking, how do I bind the new to-do variable to the input for the title? I'll show you that. So that's in the form, and it's just this. So bind : value, and then the variable that we want to bind it to. Also, Look how far I can point. Oh, not that far. I reached my limit. I can point a lot farther than usual. So bind colon value. So we're binding the value attribute of the input element to be this variable, which is just a string. Where are we at? What are we doing? Let's look at our to-do list. So we can mark it as done. Now we want to be able to delete. Well, that's not done, but we want to be able to delete a to-do. So actually like remove it from the list or from the array. So what if we have a button? Actually not even a button. Do we have a trash can? Yeah, this. If we click that, we want to delete it. I am going to give this a class of delete. And then when you hover over the delete emoji, can we zoom it? Scale? 1.2? So, learn Svelte. That's... We probably just want a separate button. Honestly, we just want a separate button. Oh, is there a hype train right now? Nice. Nice. But I do want to put this in a span, like this. And Chief Mustardo, thank you for the 5 gifted. Much appreciated. And we're going to move that click from the entire list item to just the title itself. Cool. So now, if I click the title, it does that. But if I click the delete button, it doesn't, which is fine by me. I do want it to get bigger, though. Font size? Cool. But I don't like that it moves the whole line. Which is why I wanted to do a transform. Can you not do a transform on a span? On like an inline element? Is that not something you can do? Should be possible. It's not, though. Am I doing this hover thing right? Is this right? Is this how you CSS zoom it? How to CSS. Okay. Oh, you're probably right. Is it 2 colons? How does CSS work? Oh no, I thought 2 colons was for like pseudo selectors. Inline elements are bad. Okay. So inline block should be fine. Yeah, that's what it was, the inline block. Cool. Cool. That's why I used Tailwind. Well, if you use Tailwind, you still have to know CSS. Okay, regardless, whenever we click this, we want to call a delete function. So we'll do something like when it's clicked, remove to do. I mean, in this case, this is why it would be nice to have the index, because then we can just splice that index from the array. And so now we have a remove to do function that takes in the index and then just says todos dot splice index 1 and then set it equal to itself. So now it's gone. We could use filter. Filter creates a new array though, so that's more memory. Learn JavaScript. Walk the dog. Do the dishes. Cool. So we have quite a few features. Now we can mark them as done, which is great. And then we can also delete them. Yeah. Just get more memory. I'm not making the to-do a separate component to keep it simple. I just started coding, but we probably should. I mean, basically, yeah, this could be the to-do item component for sure. I'm going to leave it at that, though. Yeah, now we're going to work on the local storage stuffs because right now, if I refresh the page, all the to-dos disappear. So now we're going to watch for changes on the to-dos array and then save it to local storage. So let's do that here. I mean, technically, the only time the to-dos change is whenever we add one and remove one. So I could just write to local storage right here, but I do want to show you how you can watch a variable in Svelte. And it's something like this. Like it says, hey, watch this. And then whenever that changes, run a function. I don't know what this is called, though. Does anyone know what this is called? Reactive declarations. Yeah, mark a statement as reactive. There we go. Something like this. This will update document.title whenever the title prop changes. Okay, so that's not, I mean, really all we want is local storage.setItem to-dos to be json.stringify to-dos. And so now, this statement right here, the state variable that it references is to-dos. And so when to-dos change, it will write it to local storage. Should, anyways. Let's test it. So if we take a look here, we take a look in local storage, it's already there as an empty array, so that's great. And if I add something, it updates it. If I mark something as done, it updates it. That's great. Right? Wow, it's magic. It's magic. Yeah, so Svelte has basically reused the label statement, because this is technically valid JavaScript. It's like a labeled statement, but behind the scenes, it's doing a very different thing. All of this says is whatever variables are referenced on this line, repurpose. Yeah, it's repurposed it. Whenever they change, run this line of code. Yeah. So that's great. So now it's saving them to local storage. And then when the page loads, so let's add a few more. Cool. So now we have these. Right now, if I reload the page, they disappear, right? But what we want is when the page loads, we need to set an initial value for to-dos. So we could say if local storage dot get item to-dos is a thing, then we need to parse it into an array. So we'll do json.parse with that. Otherwise, set it to an empty array. And so now, when I load the page, it's going to load in that data from local storage. Did I call it the right thing? Why is it gone? It completely wiped it out, right? Right? Oh, that's IndexedDB. Here we go. Oh, because it got reset. Whenever I refresh the page, it overwrote it with nothing. But let's fix that. Okay, so learn Svelte, learn React, learn Vue, learn Angular, walk the dog. Okay, so now we have multiple things. If I close this tab and I reopen it, they're back. And it also keeps all of the internal state as well. So like if I mark these as done, close the tab, reopen it, it all was stored in local storage. So we get that. It's great. It's beautiful. Yeah. So we're watching them for changes and then we're loading them on page load. Quick rundown of everything we built. So ultimately we have a form. That form has an input. We bind the value of that input using this syntax here, so it gets bound to a variable in our component. We can add an event listener for form submission. We can automatically prevent the default action, and we can pull in props. So in this case, we're calling the prop add to do with the value from the form. Add to do is defined in the parent. It just modifies its own state variable, which is just an array. So by default, it's an empty array, but otherwise we're pulling it in from local storage. There's this weird syntax here. Anytime we modify an array with an array method, like push, pop, splice, anything like that, we have to let Svelte know that it changed, which is why we're reassigning it to itself, which is a little hacky, but that's how you do it. We've got this nice reactive declaration here. And this is the first time we saw each block. So this is how you iterate over a list. This is how you do conditional rendering. We also did class bindings. So we're binding the done class to do.done. Yeah, cool. We're going to do a SvelteKit now. So far, we've only generated apps using like the basic Svelte template. Now we're going to use SvelteKit, which is like a server-side rendered thing, very similar to like Next.js, but it's for Svelte. It has routing built in. I've never used it before, not even once. So here we go, and we're going to build a Reddit client. So just a basic app that pulls in Reddit posts and lists them all out. Yeah. We're going to do this with Reddit client. Okay. Which template do I want? I don't think we want the demo app. Let's just do a project. No TypeScript. No ESLint. No prettier. Just basic stuff. So go into Reddit client. Install dependencies. npm run dev. Open it up. Look at that. We've got a SvelteKit app. The main difference between SvelteKit and what we were just working on is SvelteKit is basically an Express app. So this is a back-end application. If we were to deploy it, we would need a server running node.js, whereas the other apps we were building were completely front-end apps. So we could have statically built them and then just put them on a static file host, and they would work just fine. It is technically possible to pre-render SvelteKit, but if you look at their docs, they basically just say, don't do that. And yeah, let me change the port on this. So let's open it up. Also, what is this? Svelte for VS Code? Do I not have this? I should have installed that when we started. Let's try -- port. Yeah. Who's to say? Yeah, that worked. So now it's running on port 4389. Awesome. At this point, I do want to add the Pico CSS thing that we've been using. I'm guessing we put it in this file. So this kind of looks like our layout file. So any page that gets rendered is going to render the body of that page here, but the head would be reused like on all of the various pages that we have. So let me just link that same Pico CSS thing. Cool. And then let's just test it out. So if we add a new route, banana.svelte. Whoa. My editor's being way too helpful. All I wanted to demonstrate is we now have this banana.svelte file, which should mean we have a banana route. So in the browser, if I go to /banana, banana, it renders that page. So that's cool. Okay. Let's do this. So I want a specific route that's like r/ JavaScript or whatever you put in. It's going to go to that specific subreddit. Can I put a / in a file name? I don't think I can. Oh, that makes sense. But let's look at their docs because I don't know how you do like parameterization. Let's see. Pages. I think I did it right with the square brackets. Dynamic parameters are encoded using brackets. For example, a blog post might be defined by blog/slug.svelte. Soon, we'll see how to access that parameter in a load function or the page store. A function that defines a page or a layout can export a load function that runs before the component is created. This function runs both during server-side rendering and in the client and allows you to get data for the page. That makes sense. So I can export an async load function. This is kind of what I want to do because that's going to give me access to the name of the subreddit that we're trying to load. Page store would be better for this. I'll take a look. So now if I go to r/JavaScript, URL is not defined. That makes sense. Let me get rid of all this. The load function must return a value. Okay. So JavaScript is there. Is that running? Yeah, it's running on the server side too. So that's interesting. That's very interesting. Cool. I am going to look into page store because that's what DeCollars is saying is potentially better for this. Stores are contextual. They are added to the context of your root component. It looks too complicated. I'm going to stick to this, to the load function, because the load function just needs to make the API request out to Reddit. So we do something like this. The URL we want to request is www.reddit.com. Or I think we do api.reddit.com/r/that.json. That actually should do it. And then we're just going to have a prop called data. And it's going to look like that. Great. Cool. If we look at the network tab, I believe it is making that request on the server side. So if we look for any XHR requests, yeah, so the client side is not making the request for Reddit. I believe the backend is. At this point, we actually want to use these props. So what if I were to just do this? Do we get access to data or props.data? Like that? Undefined. Let's keep reading. So our load function returns an object with props on it. And then how do we use it? SvelteKit's load receives an implementation of fetch, which has the following special properties. It has access to cookies on the server. It can make requests against the app's own endpoints. Makes a copy of the response when you use it. Load only applies to page and layout components. Export let variable in the... Oh, this needs to be a separate script tag? Is that what you're saying? Whoa! That's crazy. That's too easy. Cool. Yeah, so we got all of our Reddit data. What's interesting is that request to Reddit did happen on the server side. It didn't happen on the client, which is fine. It's totally fine. It's just interesting to note. So we have the data. Now we can just iterate over it. I really want to do res.json.data. Like that. Yeah, so then we get this. And then really, I want to do children, and we can just call this posts because it's all of the Reddit posts that we want to show. Like that. So it's an array. And now at this point, we can just iterate over it. So let's see if I can remember the each syntax. Each posts. Is it in post? And then we need our /each. And then each one of these is going to be a div. I can't remember. We're going to have to go back to how to do it. Docs. Each expression as. Okay. And then we'll have a little h3 with post.title. Undefined. Nice. I think it's like post.children or post.data.title. Yeah. Look at that. We've done it. So that's iterating over the posts. Let's do like an h4. Let's give this a class of post, and then we'll add some styles. So the post has, let's say, like outline 2 pixels solid white, and some padding of 2 rem, and margin of 1 rem. Nice. Nice. And then we could make this title clickable. So we'll make it an anchor tag. And then we need to bind the href to be, or actually, do I bind it, or can I just do href equals post.data.permalink URL? I think that's the property name. And we'd have to put Reddit in front of it. www.reddit.com/that. No. I just need to load the API response so I can see all the properties. So data dot permalink. That's all I need. It's permalink. Cool. So yeah, and then we'll also make that open in a new tab. We need the no referrers, no thingies, but now I can click it. It'll open up Reddit in a new tab. Seems fine. Seems totally fine. Let me just do that. Anchor tag no target. How do I fix it? Rel, no opener, no referrer. That's what I mean. Yeah, thank you, Nikki Poo. Great. This is good enough. I think I'm done here. I technically still have a little bit more time, but we demonstrated a couple of things in SvelteKit that we don't really have, or that we couldn't demonstrate in Svelte because it didn't have it. So we get routing out of the box. So very similar to like if you ever use Next.js or Nuxt, you just define your components within this folder, and then it automatically generates routes for you. We did learn about this async load function, so this is going to get called before the page loads and potentially run this code on the server side or potentially on the client side. So what's nice about what we've just written is I can go to r/Vue.js, and it still works because it just uses that param to make a request out to Reddit to get the list of posts for that specific subreddit that's from the URL. Or if we went to r/aw, is it 3 W's or 4 W's? r/aw has 3,000 members with 4 W's. With 3 W's, 200,000 members. They should have like millions of members. 2 W's. 2 W's is what we want. Okay, but what I want to show really quick is that let's just render out the images as well. That'll be one of the last things we do. So if we look at a post, it has a thumbnail property. Does it have an image property or media property? It has a preview property, preview images. Secure media? Reddit video? Oh. Because they're GIFs. Yeah. I should be fine. Let's do it. So we'll do a conditional render here, right below the title. If post dot data dot secure media secure-media.reddit video and then the source is going to be Reddit video dot dash URL. No, I don't want that. Scrubber media URL. It's so tiny though. HLS URL. Fallback URL. That's the one. Fallback URL. We'll say muted autoplay loop. Nice. Let's just add some styles though. So the video should just have a width of 100%. Yeah. Oh, look at that llama. That's a furry llama. Cool. Whoa. That's like a parkour goat. Parkour. Nice. Nice. I think these are just images. So let's see. So nice view. I like it. Children at 2. So this is an example of a post that's just an image. I think it has a URL. And then, like if I open that up, yeah, that's the image. But is there any property that tells me it's an image? Is meta at the bottom? Is video? Well, the thing is, it could be a text post. And a text post doesn't have an image. Like, the first post, I believe, is a text post. Post hint? I could check the extension, but that's too much work. I feel like the API should tell me something, right? Post hint. Link. Okay. And then here, where is it? Post hint. Image. Cool. Okay, so if it has secure media, do this. How do you do else? So we'll set that here, data.url. Colon else? So this is the one thing I don't like about Svelte. Are the eaches and the ifs syntax, just because it's like nothing I've ever used before. So I always have to look it up. If, else if. The syntax is just the Svelte templating language. Yeah. And then we will set the alt text to be the title of the post. And then images also have 100% width. Okay. This is the last change. It should just work. Here we go. This is our simple little Reddit clone using SvelteKit. We can go to any subreddit. So if we go to r/JavaScript, with one T, most of the posts on r/JavaScript are just links or like text posts. So we're not going to see much there. But if we go to r/aw, we will see the image is embedded. So we have this majestic kitty. Nice view. He loves minimalism. Oh, is he gonna break that? No, they stopped him. Cruz the horse enjoys Native American flute music. Look at him. Cool. Yeah, let's go to programming humor. That's where we will end the stream. Is it programmer humor or programming humor? Oh, I didn't have the video controls. You can put controls on there. If you just put the word controls right here, that'll give you like volume control and like a media scrubber. I think it's programmer humor. Right? Yeah, 1.7 million HTML programmers. All right, let me fix it. That moment, error on line 42. I can do this. It told me exactly what line the error is on. You go to line 42 and there's nothing there. That's funny. Here's the thing. If you're running into this issue, it's probably because you're using some sort of build tool and you don't have source maps enabled. Source maps will map the errors back to the original line numbers instead of like the transpiled or compiled line numbers. But yeah. All right, next thing. What's the best thing you found in code? You may think that, so this is a comment. It's a comment in some code. You may think that this function is obsolete and doesn't seem to do anything, and you would be correct. But when we remove this function, for some reason, the whole program crashes and we can't figure out why. So here it will stay. Yeah. Fun with flags. So this is the Norway flag. Anybody from Norway here right now? This is the Norway flag. And then all of these other things are logic gates. She.moe is from Norway. Look at that. They have the Norway flag too. And Kryton. Nice. But this is essentially like logic gates on the flag instead. So this is the exclusive OR logic gate, the exclusive NOR, the AND gate, and a quick rundown of gates if you're not familiar with them. So gates typically have two inputs. Sometimes they have one input, like the NOT gate, but you have two inputs. And the AND gate will output true if both input 1 and input 2 are true. But if either input 1 or input 2 are false, the output is going to be false. So that's an AND gate. A NAND gate is a not AND gate. So if both are true going into it, true will come out of it, but it'll be flipped, so it'll be false. So true becomes false, false becomes true. And then this is just a NOT gate. So whatever it goes in gets flipped. So true going in becomes false, or false coming in becomes true. And it's just funny because they all kind of look like the Norway flag. Yeah. Places. All right, last joke, and then we'll go. 1 in 8 Americans have worked at McDonald's. 1 in 10 Americans think HTML is a sexually transmitted disease. What is this even from? Okay, this is a printed book, is the thing. That's funny. All right, one more. Charmander used Bite. It did 8 bits of damage. In case you didn't know, the collective of Charmander is Stringmander. This is funny. This is funny if you've ever used like a lower level programming that has characters or chars, and you like Pokemon. Because like if for example in C, a char is a character and a string is a collection of characters. So Charmander, Stringmander. That's funny. We're gonna end it there. All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. I'm sorry I got a little rushed towards the end here. I am going to push all this code up to GitHub. Oh well. Code's there. In a future stream, we'll build a movie search app with SvelteKit, and we can explore more of the features. Like we barely even scratched the surface of SvelteKit this time.